I want to talk to that version of you that's tired, not just physically tired, but soul tired. You've been carrying burdens that were never yours to carry, replaying old wounds like they're part of your identity. And let's be honest, some of you have become so familiar with survival that you've forgotten what it means to actually live. But I came to remind you that God didn't create you just to cope with life. He called you to conquer it. See, too many of us are trying to transform our lives without transforming our thoughts. And it doesn't work like that. You can't plant purpose in a polluted mind and expect to harvest peace. Whew, I felt that. The truth is, some of us have built mental homes in places God only meant for us to pass through. We've decorated trauma like it's our address. We've called fear wisdom. We've labeled procrastination as waiting on a sign. And meanwhile, time is moving. Destiny is waiting. But your thoughts are on pause. But what if you gave yourself 3 days, not 3 years, not 3 decades, just 3 days to surrender, reset, and rewire? Day one is where the walls come down, the lies get exposed, the pride gets silenced, and the real work begins. But don't stop there. Day two, that's the fight, because transformation doesn't happen in a whisper, it happens in a war. You won't want to go back. You will. I hear those old voices rise up. You'll never change. You always mess it up. Who do you think you are? But this time, instead of agreeing with them, I want you to interrupt them. Open your mouth and say, that's not who I am anymore. Because you're not in agreement with the past. You're in alignment with your purpose. Day two is about replacing. It's about retraining your mind to speak life instead of death. It's speaking to your fears like you own the room. Fear, you don't get to speak today. Insecurity, sit down. Doubt, I'm not taking your advice anymore. It's choosing to believe, even when your circumstances look the same, that something inside you is shifting. That's faith, sis. It doesn't always look like a miracle. Sometimes it just looks like consistency. Waking up and doing the thing even when your feelings haven't caught up yet. Let me be clear. This is not about pretending everything's okay. This is about choosing to rise even when everything says you shouldn't. It's about knowing that every time you say yes to healing, yes to wholeness, yes to freedom, you're saying no to generational bondage, no to cycles, no to settling for less than you were created for. Day three is not about perfection. It's not about having it all figured out. It's about ownership. It's waking up and realizing that your thoughts are no longer leading you. You're leading them. You start speaking differently, walking differently. You're not entertaining the same conversations, the same distractions. You start saying no without guilt. You set boundaries without explanations. You show up as the healed version of yourself, not because you've arrived, but because you're committed to the journey. And the people around you will notice. They'll say, something's different about her. And you'll smile, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Your mind is sacred ground. Stop letting anything and everything live there. If it doesn't serve your healing, your growth, or your purpose, it doesn't belong in your thoughts. And I know 3 days doesn't sound like a lot, but baby, it only took 3 days for Jesus to change the whole world. What makes you think 3 days can't change yours? So I'm not asking for a lifetime commitment. I'm not even asking for a month. I'm just asking you to try. Give yourself 3 days to detox your mind from the lies, the labels, the limits. 3 days to speak life, to speak vision, to call those things that are not as though they were. So often, when we find ourselves feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated with where life is, the first instinct is to look outward. We start scanning our surroundings, searching for what needs to shift. We say things like, if I had more time, if they treated me better, if I had grown up differently, if this hadn't happened to me. We go looking for transformation in everything outside of us, when the real transformation begins within. Real, lasting change doesn't start with your job, your relationships, or even your opportunities. It starts with your mind. See, you can change your location, but if you bring the same mindset with you, you'll recreate the same chaos in a new place. You can lead the relationship, lead the job, lead the city, but if you don't deal with the thought patterns that led you into those situations in the first place, you'll keep finding yourself in new versions of the same old pain. And I know it's not easy, because your thoughts don't just live in your head. They've become part of your identity. From past experiences to wounds, to memories, to the stories you've told yourself just to survive. But this surviving isn't the goal anymore. We're not just trying to make it through. We're trying to become. Becoming starts when you dare to pause and look your thoughts in the face. No filter, no distraction, just you and the truth. And the truth is, a lot of what you've been thinking isn't even your own voice. It's the voice of that teacher who said you'd never amount to anything. The voice of that relationship that made you feel small. The voice of fear that whispered, you're not enough every time you tried to step out. But just because a thought is loud doesn't make it true. And just because you've thought it for years doesn't mean you have to keep agreeing with it. Transformation demands confrontation. You have to get bold enough to question your own narrative. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Who told me this was true? What would happen if I believed something different? This isn't about judgment, it's about liberation. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't renew a mind you're still pretending is fine. You want new fruit? You've got to dig up old roots. That means facing the parts of you that are still hurting, the parts that smile in the mirror but scream in silence, the parts that have learned how to look confident but still wrestle with self-doubt, the parts that sabotage anything good because they don't believe they're worthy of it. And when those thoughts rise up, and they will, you meet them with truth. You meet them with scripture. You meet them with power. You remind your mind that you're not just a product of your past. You're a reflection of God's promise. This process isn't comfortable, but growth never is. This is the tearing down of strongholds. This is the unlearning of lies. This is the sacred work of saying, my mind is not a battlefield. I'm taking back my peace. And every time you choose awareness over autopilot, every time you pause a negative thought before it takes root, every time you resist going back to what's familiar just because it's comfortable, that's transformation. That's victory. And it begins with you. Once you've had the courage to confront your thoughts, the next step is to replace them, because recognizing the lie is only part of the healing. What truly transforms you is when you choose to let it go and put truth in its place. You can't just stop thinking negative thoughts and hope your mind heals on its own. No, sis. Emptiness leaves space for confusion. You've got to be intentional about what you feed your mind. The thoughts you've been living with, some of them have been with you so long they feel like home. But comfort doesn't always mean safety. Some of those thoughts are dressed in logic, but rooted in fear. They sound like wisdom, start dreaming again. You've got to understand cycles don't start with situations, they start with thoughts. The same loop that plays in your mind is what leads to the same choices, the same relationships, the same pain in a different disguise. That's why replacing your mindset is more than just positive thinking. This is about renewing your mind. It's spiritual, it's intentional, it's holy ground. To break the cycle, you've got to build a new mental foundation, brick by brick. That means when a thought comes up that doesn't align with where God is taking you, you stop it on sight. You say, that's not my truth. And you don't stop there. You speak what is. You declare the word of God. You speak life over your story. You don't just remove the lie. You replace it with truth, with power, with promise. It might sound like I'm not enough gets replaced with I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Deeply messed up gets replaced with all things work together for my good. No one sees me gets replaced with I am fully known and deeply loved by God. Your healing requires clarity. Your growth demands mental discipline. That means turning down the volume of everything that tries to distract you from your assignment. That means being intentional, setting your thoughts on what is good, what is true, what is worthy, what is aligned. It means reminding yourself as often as necessary that your mind is sacred and anything that doesn't honor that doesn't belong. Every time you say no to a thought that wants to drag you back into an old identity, you make room for peace. Every time you challenge a thought that says you're not ready, you open the door to courage. Every time you decide to let go of what no longer serves your healing, you get a little closer to wholeness. Now, this is not about pretending bad thoughts don't exist. It's about refusing to let them have the final word, because you're not a victim to your thoughts. You are the architect of your mindset, and every day you get to choose whether your thoughts will be a trap or a tool, whether they'll bind you or build you. And when your thoughts are aligned with your purpose, your actions begin to follow. That's when the shift becomes real, not just in your mind, but in your life. 3 days might not sound like much in the grand scheme of a lifetime, but when those days are drenched in intentionality, they hold the power to shift everything. We think transformation has to take years, decades even, but the truth is, change begins the moment you decide to show up differently. The moment you stop waiting for motivation and start moving in purpose. And when you commit 3 days to fully engage your mind in renewal, reflection, and redirection, you create a crack in the cycle, a space where breakthrough can slip in and take root. This isn't about fixing your whole life in 72 hours. It's about disrupting the patterns that have been running your life without permission. It's about saying, for the next 3 days, I'm choosing to be fully present. I'm choosing to be honest about where I am and open to where I'm going. I'm choosing to check my thoughts, challenge my beliefs, and charge up my faith. When you give your mind that kind of focus, even for a short window, it opens the door for something supernatural to happen. Most of us are walking around with years of unfiltered, unhealed, and unchecked thoughts. We're reacting out of habit, speaking from fear, and making decisions from pain. But what if 3 days of alignment could break the autopilot? What if a focused pause could clear the fog and allow clarity to rise? What if in 3 days you didn't become a whole new person, but you met the version of you that's been buried under the noise? When you set aside even a short time to feed your mind truth, your spirit starts to wake up. The lies get quieter. The shame starts to loosen its grip. The fear that used to paralyze you, it starts to lose power, because now you're not just hearing truth. You're choosing it. You're meditating on it. And over time, those small intentional steps begin to rewire the way you think. The mind doesn't change through passivity. It shifts through repetition and revelation. And that's what happens when you dedicate 3 days to showing up fully. Every moment of resistance becomes an opportunity for revelation. Every time an old thought rises, you get to choose a new response. You get to interrupt the spiral. You get to stop saying, this is just how I am, and start declaring, this is who I'm becoming. In 3 days, you can begin to change the way you talk to yourself. You can stop agreeing with narratives that were never yours to carry. You can take one step away from your past and one step closer to your promise. Because what you do with intention becomes your rhythm. And if you can create a rhythm of reflection, a rhythm of renewal, a rhythm of checking in with your thoughts and redirecting them toward purpose, you'll start to live like someone who knows her mind is powerful. We underestimate the power of short-term discipline. But it's in those short-term choices that long-term change is born. A shift in thinking becomes a shift in language. A shift in language becomes a shift in behavior. And a shift in behavior, that becomes a shift in destiny. 3 days might not erase the pain, but they can plant the seed of purpose. They might not solve every problem, but they can spark the vision for a new path. Because when you give your mind a taste of freedom, it starts to crave more. And that craving pulls you into more healing, more growth, more peace. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to start. And sometimes all it takes is 3 intentional, sacred, committed days to remind yourself of who you are, what you carry, and where you're headed. 3 days to break the pattern. 3 days to shift the atmosphere in your mind. 3 days to awaken the woman inside of you who's been waiting for permission to rise. There's something holy, something sacred about a decision made in the quiet. That moment when you don't need an audience, you don't need the perfect setting, you just get still enough to say, I'm ready. That's where transformation begins, not in the noise, not in the applause, but in that internal decision to become. And the beautiful thing about a 3-day journey is that it doesn't just require belief. It invites action. You're not just dreaming about freedom anymore. You're walking toward it, one intentional choice at a time. When you commit to 3 days of mental renewal, something starts to break open. You start realizing how much of your life has been dictated by thoughts that were never aligned with your truth. You start paying attention to how your mind speaks to you in the silence, how it rehearses shame, repeats fear, plays back old pain like a song stuck on repeat. And for the first time, you don't just let those thoughts play. And you stop them. You say, not today. Not anymore. That interruption, that's not small. That's power. That's authority. That's the beginning of rewiring. You've been taught to manage your mind like it's a wild thing that can't be tamed. But your mind was never meant to control you. You were called to renew it, shape it, fill it. And that renewal doesn't come by chance. It comes by choice. You don't have to wait for the right season. You don't have to wait until you feel strong. You can start right here, in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the questions, in the middle of the doubt. Because the woman you're becoming, she's not waiting for life to make sense. She's choosing to move anyway. Over these 3 days, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. You start recognizing the difference between your truth and your trauma, between your faith and your fear, between your identity and your insecurity. And even if the voices of doubt don't go silent right away, they start to lose their grip. Because every time you choose awareness over avoidance, you reclaim a little more ground.